everyone. Welcome back to Underreported Stories. Hope you all had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. For anyone in the armed services that's listening to the show, an extra thank you to you for your sacrifice and your service. Freedom, as we all know, is not free, and I am so eternally grateful for you and the sacrifices that you and your family made. So thank you again. Anyway, I wanted to kick off this show by unpacking a wild debate between psychologist Jordan Peterson and a bunch of atheists on the Jubilee YouTube channel. So if you're unfamiliar with Jubilee debates on YouTube, it's a popular debate channel, and they have a few different type of debate setups. But for the video that Jordan Peterson was in, the premise is one person with one viewpoint versus 20 people with the opposing viewpoint. You might have seen this with Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro versus 20 leftists. That's been a really common one. But Jordan Peterson was on an episode originally titled One Christian versus 20 Atheists. Except in the episode, Jordan Peterson decides that he's no longer self-identifying as a Christian. Let's pull up the clip and watch this together.
Why is that relevant?
Because you go to a Catholic church, don't you? Or you've attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay, you're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
how do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is?
He's on a debate about Christians versus atheists. How would it not be?
This is Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a Christian or you're not.
I won't talk to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
And that was that. Now, Jubilee has since changed the title of the clip to be Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. So a noticeable shift in how they're doing things over there. The problem is that the premise of the video, as even the individuals on the show know, is that the argument is Christianity versus atheism. And I find it really, really odd that someone as famous, as well known as Dr. Jordan Peterson would go into a debate like this, understanding the premise and then not actually aligning with it. Right? Personally, I myself have had groups reach out to me for speaking engagements, and I look at their mission, and I know that their mission doesn't align well enough with my mission. And so I politely say, no, I don't think this is a good match, even if the engagement is a good opportunity, because a failure in mission alignment is not going to end well for either party. So I find this very odd, again, that there are so many people like PR bookers and whatnot that would have to approve this, right? For some context, though, about Jordan Peterson's religious background, Peterson has done biblical lectures on Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. He then did a nearly 17-part series on the book of Exodus for the Daily Wire. He has very much postured himself online as a very moral Christian man who routinely discusses God. And as the individual in the video made note of, he has attended church and does attend church. To go into a debate where Jordan Peterson is arguing with 20 atheists, has multiple lectures and series on the Bible, and then proclaims to not be Christian, love him or hate him, it was a weird interaction. It was. Where I saw a moment of perhaps confusion in the video that we just watched was that atheists attempt to conflate Catholicism and Christianity. Now, technically, Catholicism is a sect of Christianity. But if you're well versed in it, you understand that the Western Church of 2025 is radically different from Catholicism, right? Non-denominational and Catholicism don't necessarily align when it comes to churches in the US. So to conflate kind of the daily doctrine or habits of a Catholic with the daily doctrines or habits of a Christian, they're not 100% precise in parallel. If Jordan Peterson was attempting to say he does not align directly with Catholic doctrine, that's fine. An explanation on the difference between Catholicism and Christianity would be important to know. But to radically change your stance in the midst of a debate from Christianity to atheist in the middle of an argument you seem to be losing is weird. It is. Now, this clip comes in tandem with commentary from former Daily Wire talent Candace Owens about the alleged decline of Jordan Peterson. And this online spat has been going on since Candace parted ways with the Daily Wire. And this online spat even continued into March 13th of 2025. And I saw this, and at first I didn't really think anything of it, and now I'm kind of seeing it through a new lens. This tweet, we'll say, is Candace, March 13th, saying it's a kind of like a fight between her and Andrew Klavan, and Candace says, "Thank you for re-upping this most crucial conversation about, quote, Christ is King, almost exactly a year later, and once again during the season of Lent. After a year of thoughtfulness, I want you to know I will never stop declaring it." Jordan Peterson then goes on to say, "Candace Owens, a true farcical, I believe, pretender. She vociferously proclaims her devotion to Christ for no other reason than to elevate her perceived status." I don't know how he would know that, but anyway. "Her outrage is designed not to shout the truth from the rooftop, build bridges, or make peace, but to subvert Christianity itself with its new force, to her own purposes. She is literally using God's name in vain. There are few more unforgivable sins." Now, I find that quite an odd thing to say for Jordan Peterson when he himself proclaimed an alleged devotion to Christ for seemingly no other reason than to get people to go behind a paywall and watch his lectures on the Bible. I'm not saying that either of them are actually doing that. I'm just saying I find the behavior odd. I do. And speaking of Candace, by the way, on, I believe it was Thursday's episode, we had on a guest who vehemently dislikes Candace. And you know what? Great. I don't care. The guests that come on the show, they can say whatever the heck they like. That's what I like. I like my guests to have all different points of views. Now, there are some parts of Candace I like, and there are some parts I don't. And as your host of your show, I like you guys to know where I stand. So here is where I stand. I have never met Candace for more than maybe 2 minutes in passing, both at Turning Point USA and Daily Wire when we both worked there at the same time. So I do not know her heart or her personality well at all. Okay? Same with Jordan Peterson. And so I won't proclaim to know their motivations behind things. All I can do is comment on how I feel about their online commentary, not them as individuals. What I can say is that my thoughts on her work have been consistent both before and after she spoke out about Israel. I actually pulled up this picture from October of 2020. Back in the day, I used to do little, like book ratings and recaps on my Instagram story. This isn't even on my public Instagram. I have a private Instagram for most of my liberal friends and college friends that I still talk to, and I just put like private pictures on there. Anyway, I had given her book, Blackout, a 5 out of 10. And my main criticism of the book was that Candace had a tendency to make a point, we'll call it point A, and then she would make it a connection from point A to point B. And then out of nowhere, she would make a connection to point C that in my eyes came out of nowhere and didn't make any logical sense. The connection from point A to point B was perfectly logical. And then she'd be like, oh, and this point C. And I'm like, I'm so confused why point C was even added to this. It's confusing. So this has always been my kind of point of view on Candace. And when I consume her content, which is probably, I'm going to say once a month, maybe, I still notice that same pattern. She will connect, let's say, Justin Paldoni, which will be point A, to a nefarious PR firm, which is point B. So point A to point B. And she'll spend 3/4 of the video connecting point A to point B. And then at the very last second, she'll be like, also, this person is Jewish. And you're like, I'm so point A to point B made perfect sense. I'm so with you. And then you bring in point C, and I'm just like, I'm so confused. I'm not seeing the correlation, or she knows something that she can't say publicly, and so it just doesn't connect in my brain. So to clarify, I think Candace Owens is very smart. I think most of the time she's a truth teller. I think she's very well sourced. I don't know how she can claim to be Christian and be anti-Israel as she proclaims. It's not alignment with the gospel. Criticizing the Israeli state and the bad actors, that's totally fine. That's not anti-Christian. Being actively anti-Israel and anti-Jewish, that is a big red flag for me. That's like not a Christian thing. So anyway, that is where I stand on that. That is my consistent view on Candace for the last 5 years. I have not changed my mind because we disagree on Israel, okay? So I just want to clarify that because I was getting some comments, and not that I care, but I figured I owe it to you guys, right? We have a great relationship. Anyway, let's get into our stories for today. Democrats are considering spending $20 million to study why they're losers. A Maryland representative flew to El Salvador to represent an illegal immigrant. NPR is suing the Trump administration, and the anchor of 60 Minutes gave an absolutely unhinged commencement speech. So, without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Today's show is brought to you by the Challenge the Faith podcast. It's a raw, real, and sometimes uncomfortable look at what it means to follow Jesus in today's world. Challenge the Faith asks the questions most Christians are afraid to ask, like, why do we suffer? Why do we sing songs at the beginning of church? And does your denomination even matter? Now, it's not a sermon. It's not a lecture. It's like a fly-on-the-wall conversation for a church small group. It challenges Christian point of views, and it encourages skepticism. New episodes drop every Wednesday, so tomorrow. And by the way, I am a co-producer on the show, so please go and check out the show because it helps me. I've linked it in the description, and if you're watching on YouTube, the Challenge the Faith channel is tagged in there as well. If you could, please go follow us on YouTube. That would mean a lot. Okay, so I want to start off our first story by talking about the New York Times revealing that the Democrats plan to spend $20 million to, quote, reverse the erosion of Democratic support among young men, especially online. This plan is codenamed SAM, which stands for Speaking with American Men, a Strategic Plan. And it promises to study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in online spaces. Now, I don't want to take credit for this myself because I would never do such a thing, but my friend John made such an incredible point. Let me pull this up for you guys. Okay, so he tweeted out in response to this $20 million plan, which is so funny. These are old headlines from the left in the past year. MSNBC, the far-right's obsession with fitness is going digital. Newsweek, how hot girls became the right's new obsession. And then The Nation, how could you forget this? How red meat became the red pill for the alt-right. And he tweeted, working out is right-wing, liking hot girls is right-wing, eating red meat is right-wing. Dems today, we need $20 million to understand why young men hate us. I think we could figure it out for you. The real problem for the Democratic Party is what they stand for is counterintuitive to how men and women were created at a time and in an era where people are yearning for a reset. And when we as a culture yearn for that reset, that means we want to go back to our factory settings. Factory settings are men are strong. They tend to work out. They traditionally like hot women. And they eat red meat for the most part. And for women, that looks like women being at home more. Perhaps being homemakers. Perhaps having side jobs that are fun that allow them to be in the home the majority of the time. Big corporations and government are not our friends. That's factory settings in America. Go back to our founding. But we need $20 million as Democrats to figure that out. So interesting. Another big point that this New York Times kind of bombshell article uncovered was that the Democrat Sam plan is to create a Joe Rogan of the left. Let me say this so clear. That is not possible. Joe Rogan was the left. But Democrats became so effing insane that once left-leaning men, right? The men of the left, they are now considered right-leaning. Because the left made everything that was manly, everything that was not just normal for being a man, it was considered right-leaning. Now, if you've been in media for any semblance of time, I just say this as somebody who's, I'm not trying to come across as like a know-it-all by any stretch of the imagination. I just have eyes. The goal in creating a media product is not to create a competitor to free-thinking podcasts. I tell people on the right this all the time, too. This is not just a left-wing thing, right? Everybody on the right now, every time you have a conversation with somebody about right-wing media, we need to create a competitor to call her daddy. No, don't. Just seriously don't. Just make a podcast about maybe sex and interviews and be conservative, right? Be a Republican. You don't need to create an alternative. You need to be a free thinker and do good work, and it will naturally compete. Instead, the left is trying to like force a new Joe Rogan, and the right is trying to force a new Alex Cooper. What the goal should be, if you are interested in politics and think that culture, like myself, is more important to driving how people vote, if that is true, the goal then would be to get the most free-thinking, interesting people on a microphone. And then politically, as a political party, separately, the goal is to make as many free thinkers see your side as more palatable and common sense than the opposition. And the common sense of the right, which the left calls transphobia and bigotry, is really just common sense that most people know is common sense. So when I think about all of that, I'm like, I don't know why Democrats are spending $20 million to figure out what we just pieced together in what was that maybe 4-5 minutes on this podcast? We as conservative media have been piecing this together for since 2018, maybe 2016. This isn't rocket science. It just takes the Democratic Party learning from conservatism as opposed to vilifying it. But hey, you know what? The party's spending $20 million on something they could learn from listening to right-wing podcasts for free. I mean, that's pretty amazing news for Republicans. And in more amazing news for Republicans, the Democrats, they do not want to quit fighting for an illegal immigrant, okay? On Memorial Day, Democratic Representative Glenn Ivey of Maryland flew to El Salvador claiming to represent illegal immigrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man with known ties to MS-13. I've said how many times that if I never say the word or name Kilmar Abrego Garcia again, I would be so happy. Freaking Democrats, man, making me say it. So Representative Ivey went down to El Salvador and was turned away from CCOT, which is the maximum security prison in El Salvador that is holding Kilmar Abrego Garcia and other gang-related criminals that illegally entered the U.S. And when he went there, CCOT basically said, pound sand, you got to go get a permit. So here's a clip from Glenn Ivey's social media of him in El Salvador being turned away from CCOT. And by the way, guys, I do apologize for the weird audio. It is not us. It's clearly a tech issue on Glenn Ivey's team.
I'm the congressman that represents Kilmar. I came all the way down from the United States after we'd contacted their ambassador, after we'd made formal requests to our ambassador to the El Salvadoran government. And we came here to visit him today. And now they're telling us we got to go all the way back to El Salvador, to San Salvador to get a permit. That's ridiculous. We ought to have a chance to come in and visit. They knew we were coming. They knew why we were coming. And they know we have the right to do this. So they need to just cut the crap, let us get in there and have a chance to see him and talk with him. We got his lawyer here. We got somebody from the unions here to talk with him. Let us in. Stop playing games. Let us have a chance to talk with him.
What struck me as so funny about this clip is the Democratic Party does this thing where they act like America doesn't run the world, right? We are the superpower, and we can all understand that we don't have this discretion to just go in and overtake every country, right? But the left has this thing where they'll chirp on and on and on and on about how America is so bad and we should have less global authority because less represented country need more power, yada yada. It's their whole DEI thing. Then at the same time, they have the audacity to fly down to El Salvador and demand access to a maximum security prison to visit an El Salvadorian citizen they have no legal claim over. That's funny. That's freaking funny. The hypocrisy of that is laughable. In a less funny reaction to this, I think this is single-handedly one of the most moronic PR moves a representative could make. This man decided to spend his Memorial Day weekend fighting for an illegal immigrant who is not an American citizen, instead of praising the soldiers and military families on Memorial Day, right? The families that sacrificed so much so that this objective moron could spew his mouth and get taxpayers to fund his round trip to El Salvador. And I do not use this word lightly, what I'm about to say, but whoever is doing comms for Glenn Ivey, you're a retard and you should be fired. You have no idea what you're doing. Speaking of absolute morons, NPR is back in the headlines today. NPR, in 3 other Colorado-based public radio stations, are now suing the Trump administration in response to an executive order barring these media outlets from federal financial support. I got all the facts for you. This is just going to be real simple, fact-based, okay? So President Trump signed an executive order earlier in May, barring what is called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, so the CPB, not to be confused with CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol, right? This is the CPB. This order bars CPB from sending money to NPR and PBS amid Trump administration's quest to slash wasteful spending. So to be clear, NPR gets only 1% of its revenue from CPB and federal grants. However, they decided they wanted to file a lawsuit. And the lawsuit alleges that the executive order unlawfully, quote unquote, usurps Congress's power to allocate funding. So what NPR and PBS are claiming is that if Congress allocated the funds to CPB to then distribute to NPR and PBS, the Trump administration has no power to overrule Congress's power of the purse. NPR President Catherine Marr, who we discussed earlier this year on this show, she had congressional testimony in which she claimed NPR was a neutral outlet. Now Catherine Marr says in this lawsuit that the executive order issued by the Trump administration was, quote, retaliatory and viewpoint discrimination. In my opinion, it is unclear how the administration could be engaged in viewpoint discrimination if NPR is a neutral truth-telling news outlet, as Ms. Marr claims the outlet is. The only way viewpoint discrimination would take place is if NPR is, of course, not actual neutral truth-tellers, but a bunch of leftist hacks who showcase clear disdain for the very hardworking Americans who are forced to fund their lies without choice. That could probably be it. Maybe that's a fair argument. The president of CPB, her name is Patricia Harrison, has disregarded the executive order and is continuing to fund NPR and PBS while these disputes play out in federal court. Patricia Harrison is not a Democrat. She previously served as the chair of the Republican National Committee. What an absolute buffoon and truly traitor to her party. As I have consistently said about NPR and PBS, media has become an increasingly competitive field. And if these two news outlets, NPR and PBS, are as successful as they claim to be, and their journalism is just so fantastic that the people can't live without it, they can stomach losing 1% of their funding because so many people are just clamoring to give them money and views. But that's not what's happening. People are not watching. Journalism is on the decline in terms of good quality journalism, and it's happening at a micro level. It's happening on YouTube, on Rumble. It's happening on Instagram and TikTok. It's not happening at NPR. So why are we funding that? I don't know why we are. I don't think we should. I am interested in truth, though. I love uncovering the truth. In politics, in media, and even the truth about what's in our so-called cleaning products. Most store-bought cleaning products are loaded with toxic chemicals, hormone disruptors, and allergens. This is stuff that can really impact your health, your kids' health, and even your pet's health. That's why I made the switch to Branch Basics. Their products are completely non-toxic and human-safe, no synthetic fragrances, no weird chemicals. They use plant and mineral-based formulas that leave your home truly clean without compromising your health. If you're ready to toss the toxins, please head over to branchbasics.com/Chrissy, or you can use the link in the description. And again, use code Chrissy, that's CHRISSY, to get 15% off your first order. Again, use code Chrissy at checkout. CBS's 60 Minutes host, Scott Pelley, gave an unhinged commencement speech at Wake Forest over the weekend. It really lacked any semblance of self-awareness, none. So there's this video. It's kind of like a highlight clip. It's not chronological. It's just kind of combined some of the most insane moments of Scott Pelley's speech. And I'm going to pull it up for you, but I do just want to let you know I'm going to stop it periodically just to point out some of the most hypocritical parts, because it's pretty wild.
But in this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack.
When you can say freedom of speech is under attack, it can't be that much under attack. I mean, it can, kind of. But you're out here yapping your mouth all over everything. You're not being suppressed. You got thousands of people watching you. Thousands of people, by the way, that aren't clapping. They're just kind of sitting there if you're in the listening audience, they all have stone cold faces. No one's smiling. No one's reacting. Weird.
And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts.
Who do you think causes that insidious, scary thinking? Could it be perhaps a media that lies to the American public about what's actually going on to strike fear into those very people who trust them? And then those people that trust them feel fearful of institutions and presidents that are simply misunderstood by a media that hates them because they're just political hacks pretending to be media. Could that be contributing? I don't know.
The fear to speak in America. Power can rewrite history with grotesque, false narratives.
Oh, like Scott Pelley did on the 60 Minutes interview, where they totally and completely rewrote the Kamala Harris interview that they did, where they said things along the lines of Kamala was answering things for different questions, but they deceptively edited that to the point where Donald Trump is now suing CBS for election interference. It was that bad. Is that what he's referring to when he says that Republicans are changing and vilifying journalism?
They can make criminals heroes and heroes criminals.
Does he fucking hear himself? I'm sorry. It's the Republicans who are vilifying. Oh my gosh. Let me just remind you. The Democratic Party has spent this entire 2025, it is May 27th, 2025 at the time of this recording, they have spent the entire year making illegal immigrants who have ties to gangs out to be these martyrs, these Maryland men, these people who lack due process, while simultaneously making innocent pro-lifers, putting them in jail. F the F off. The lack of self-awareness, man, the lack of self-awareness.
Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality.
Right, because it's the Republican Party that doesn't know how to define basic biological terms like woman and man. Like, my anger's taking over me. I need to move past this video because I'm angry and I want to give this man a middle finger. But I'm growing. I'm not going to do that, okay? But the lack of self-awareness here in this video is absolutely striking. And I don't think that I'm out of touch in saying that I think even Democrats have a difficult time stomaching this one. But anyway, for our fifth and final story, it does echo the sentiments of Pele's speech about compulsory speech. So, a man who was allegedly fired from his job after wearing a religious shirt during Pride Month has finally reached a settlement. I'm going to tell you the story because I found it to be so fascinating. So, Cosby Cunningham was a quality assurance manager over at Eaton Corps and was fired in August of 2023 for wearing a t-shirt that said, "Pride goes before destruction" during Pride Month. Now, this is a direct reference from Proverbs 16:18, and Cunningham claims he wore the shirt to combat coercive use of wrong pronouns by the company in company workspaces, right? Cunningham claimed that Eaton, again, his employer, unlawfully discriminated against him for his religious expression at a time when the company was pushing an LGBT and DEI narrative and initiatives within the company. And then the company reportedly created and sold pride t-shirts, but also wouldn't allow a religious t-shirt to be worn in the office. This week, 2 years later, just shy of 2 years later, the parties reached an undisclosed out-of-court settlement. Cunningham's attorneys declined to comment on the specifics of the agreement, and the company is maintaining that they were not discriminating against religious employees. The settlement comes just days before Pride Month is set to begin. This likely means, and I can just say this from experience of arbitration, this likely means that they paid them a handsome amount of money, and he's not going to say anything, and they get to maintain that they didn't do anything wrong. Now, I don't think that this is fully just. There might have been arbitration clauses in his employment contract, which is controversial but common nowadays. But here's where I stand on it. I'm not here to judge non-Christian LGBT people. They sin, I sin, you sin, can't change it. But I will admit that the LGBT propaganda borders on a cultist religion at this point. And if one religion is celebrated at a corporation, then all religions need to receive the same or at least similar treatment. You can either allow political and religious shirts, or you don't. And per usual, my standard is always, companies need to get smart about setting a standard and then holding people accountable to that standard, regardless of their political or religious affiliation. I don't know why that's so hard for people to wrap their mind around, but apparently it is. Anyway, before we wrap up today, we do have updates on the Diddy trial. I've been trying to keep you guys abreast on this. Today, one of Diddy's former assistants alleged on the stand that Diddy threatened to kill her. Diddy reportedly threatened to kill his one-time assistant, Capricorn Clark, no relation, on her first day working with him over her former job working with Diddy's rival, Suge Knight. Diddy reportedly refused to pay her $80,000 in overtime pay, though she made just $65,000 from 2004 to 2012. She allegedly worked from 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. Clark testified that she was once forced to take a lie detector test after Diddy's diamond jewelry vanished. She testified she was told by Diddy's security entourage she'd be thrown into the East River if she failed the test. Clark corroborated testimony from another of Diddy's previous assistants, testifying that Diddy required assistants to pack bags filled with clothes, cameras, baby oil, personal lubricant, and drugs. Clark testified that Diddy physically accosted her, pushing her 25 to 30 yards when she said she hated working for him. She also testified that Diddy viciously kicked Cassie Ventura the same day that Diddy broke into the home of rapper Kid Cudi, whom Cassie had been dating. Diddy also implied he intended to pull a gun on fellow rapper nemesis 50 Cent over their long-standing beef. Again, Diddy is being tried for racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. We'll have more on the case on Thursday. Anyway, if you're a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the steak emoji? Because apparently red meat is only for conservatives. Have a great week, and I will see you guys back here on Thursday. Bye, friends. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment about how beautiful, intelligent, and funny I am. And if you want more content, click right over here for more videos and clips of my show. I'll see you back here next time. Bye.